Welcome to Journaling with Nature, the podcast for those who want to turn curiosity into wonder, a pencil sketch into a rabbit hole of discovery, a moment of stillness into a life full of joy. I'm your host, Bethan Burton. Let's open the pages of our nature journals and explore this world together. Hello, this is episode 181. I hope you're doing well. Today I'm bringing you another interview episode that I recorded months ago and haven't yet released while I was taking a break from the podcast in the thick of all our family medical emergencies. But I'm excited to be bringing it to you today. I'm speaking with teacher and nature journal educator Kirstie Willean. Kirstie lives in Alaska and has had a long teaching career, starting as a classroom teacher and then wandering through a whole range of different teaching settings. Kirstie is also a lifelong learner and is studying ethnobotany, which is the human relationship to plants. Let's listen. Kirstie, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast.
It's really good to be here. I'm imagining myself in Australia with you, as it's one of my favorite places to be. But I'll take it across the pond from you.
Well, I've always wanted to visit Alaska, and so we can have a little chat about our different regions. I really love to get to know my guests' environment. And to begin, I'd love to hear about your experiences in your early life of nature and of gardens, the things that were your beginnings, the beginnings of your connection with the natural world.
I was really fortunate to grow up in a beautiful area that was surrounded by a water district. So it was protected lands because it was the lakes and reservoirs that were serving as the water source for the county I lived in. And so that was north of San Francisco in Marin County. Yeah, it was just a beautiful, beautiful area. And so most of my childhood was spent, perfect name, on a street called Pine Drive. And and it was a dead-end street. So where it dead-ended, it went straight into the water district. So as children, kind of the way our parents got us out of our hair, it wasn't go watch television, it was go take a hike. It was like, and of course our parents did the same thing with us, but that was our outdoors. We turned our, the trees in our neighborhood up on the hills into fake submarines with our imagination. We'd make them into rocket ships and blast off and play, so the outdoors was a playground that we relished, but we also, I just remember as I got older and older, I wanted to learn more about the plants themselves. So I remember in high school and, college, biology courses, I loved them because, if you got an instructor who was enthusiastic as you were about the environment, he just soaked it up.
Yes.
So I think, it just goes back to having grown up in, I'm not going to say a wild, like wilderness area, but it was a wild area compared to what so many people are used to. And then all we did as a family when we had vacations was went camping, So, and it wasn't motorhome camping, it was tent camping,
Yes.
Out in the wilderness. So, it just was boots on the ground from the beginning, I think, and and then, my own interest in nature and the environment and learning more just kind of happened. It was just curiosity. And and I just remember, you mentioned gardening, and the same thing on this Pine Drive where I grew up. Our next door neighbor had, I guess you'd think of it as a botanical garden. If you went to visit another area, that's one of the first things my husband and I always do is go to the botanical garden in that area.
Wonderful.
And so this neighbor's garden was like that because it wasn't just our standard that everybody had. She had all these exotic plants that she was, experimenting with and doing on her own. It was just her own personal interest. And so I think that kind of fed into it too. I definitely, just exposure to other adults, as a kid who, loved plants and not just having them there, but knowing about them.
Yeah. I'd love to get to know more of your story. I know you were a classroom teacher for a long time, but also have been teaching in different capacities in different places. You tell me about your career and how it unfolded, and that teaching, that thing inside you about being a teacher and imparting your knowledge to others.
It's funny. I was thinking it's one of those things you can't let go of, even if you're not in the classroom.
Yeah.
I guess I'll back up before I was just thinking of meeting where I am right now. I was just already thinking last night about, here's a new class I could put together and offer to people. It's part just of last night. Yeah, it is. It's just, you can't help it.
Yeah.
But I think, but I don't know, I guess it's one of those, I was the oldest child, so I was kind of always the leader, right?
Yeah.
And, which included, of course, helping my younger siblings with their homework and everything else. So I don't know if that's where the teaching thing kicked into gear, if I was going to step back that far. I had a couple of my aunts who were also teachers who I adored, so maybe that was an influence, but they were 3,000 miles away on the East Coast. It's just, I loved them dearly.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but from a young age, I babysat, young children. Not much younger than myself when I started, but I did that through high school and college as a side job. And so that probably influenced it a bit, but I always knew I was going to be a classroom teacher. And so that's what, when it was time to go to college, that's what I did, is I just, went down that path. It was easy. I didn't have anything to think about. I knew what I wanted to do. The trick was, around my fourth year, I was getting bored of classes, it's like, come on, I'm ready to go. I want to get in the classroom. I've had enough of this. Yeah. And so instead of just, head to the grindstone, I went and swerved. And I swerved over and did a minor degree in environmental education.
Oh, wow.
And and so then, and that was amazing, just to spend that many university credits outdoors, learning about anything and everything to do with the environment at a deeper level than, your basic college courses. And so then the quandary was, as I came close to graduating, education in the classroom or environmental education. I was just, really torn, but, a couple different turns in the life's path put me in the classroom. And that was awesome. And it was at a time when, education in the public schools here in the United States, teachers were allowed to teach and encouraged to teach in a way that engaged children, like you were talking about your son earlier and about these projects, and you get involved in a project and you learn everything through that project. And so I really was fortunate to start teaching when I did.
Yes. And
be able to do that through the 25 years that I was in the classroom. So when I decided it was time to retire from the classroom, I was pretty young, because in Alaska, you can retire, because just of when I got here, you could retire after 20 years. And I had already done 25, and I just was ready to do some other things. And, I wasn't anywhere near ready to retire. I still haven't done that yet. But I thought I wanted to go ahead and teach sewing classes. So I did. I was teaching sewing classes to groups of children and groups of adults in our community. And that was fun, but it wasn't enough. And after about a year and a half, I was like, what else do I want to do? And so this is the bad joke, but it's, take it for what it is. I joke that I failed at retirement and went to prison.
Tell me about that.
Yeah. We have in Alaska, it's a very small state population-wise, and the state's only maximum security prison happens to be here in Seward. It's, kind of off in a corner. But so this job opened up in education in the prison.
Wow.
And I never in my life would have ever thought of, going down that path. But I don't know why, it started calling to me, and I started doing a lot of research about working in there, because it's, not a safe place to work technically. And because it's such a small town, I knew the people who were the superintendent and the assistant superintendent of the prison, knew a lot of the guards who worked there, knew a lot of the people who worked there in other capacities, did a lot of questions of them, talked with my husband seriously about it, like, how do you feel about me going to prison?
Yes.
And anyway, in the end I did, and I worked there for 6.5 years.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was an amazing experience.
What kinds of things were you doing there?
Yeah, at that particular time, there was the juvenile maximum security. So these were kids that hadn't graduated from high school yet, sadly, and the adult population. They kept them separate, but, so both populations were getting education or had the opportunity for it. And so we did a lot of GEDs, which is the general education diploma. Instead of a high school diploma, you can do your coursework in a different way. So we did a lot of that. And then I was allowed. I felt very fortunate to get the support, but I coordinated 2 apprenticeship programs so that the prisoners who were going to get out had some job skills. Yes. That in fields that they could get hired in, because a lot of times people will come out of prison and people are like, no, you're not working for us. Yeah. So those were the main things I did while I was there, was running, helping people get their GEDs plus these apprenticeship programs. Wow. And then when I finally, felt like, okay, I'm starting to get tired. It's not it's a depressing place to work after a while. Yes. For all the reasons you can imagine. So I then that was done, and so that chapter closed and the next one opened, and I went into being an Alaska statewide teaching mentor. Okay. So some of my teaching experience in Alaska had been in the rural villages here in Alaska. And this program is designed to help brand new teachers out of college, so their first and second years out of college, step into a position and hopefully succeed and do well and stay, because there's so many challenges in these small rural communities that people just, you don't run into that in college and normal life experiences. So I worked as a mentor for 3 years. And that took me all over Alaska, everywhere, Not too many corners that I hadn't traveled to, and worked with young teachers. And then I got done with that, and I worked for the Alaska Humanities Forum, which was just a whole new routine. And that's been one of my favorite jobs since teaching in the classroom. That was, it was working with new teachers coming to Alaska as well, but it was a cultural immersion program. So again, we were working to help these teachers become culturally proficient to work with the Native communities in Alaska. And so there was coursework, but we also had a remote wilderness camp that we took them to for a week. So again, imagine somebody coming from, I'm going to say Chicago, to Alaska, to a little tiny village on a river out in the middle of nowhere, technically, and just the experiences of getting them ready to go teach in a village. And so I loved that job. That was, it was just really, just really gratifying, and on all fronts, the connections that were made. And then COVID came, so we weren't taking anybody anywhere for quite a while. Mm-hmm. And so I resigned from that position because I didn't want to twiddle my thumbs. And, so then I went into independent contracting, and now I'm working with another Native community kind of in the eastern part of our state, kind of helping them develop programs under some of the grants they have. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So then that's just small, I kind of I'm way far away from working full time now, so it's just a couple hours a week. And again, I'm working with some young adults, which is really gratifying. And we're doing some good programming, and then I do the nature journaling stuff on the side.
You have just described the most amazing span of different ways of teaching, and as you said, you're taking something that's inside of you, which is that teaching mentality, that teaching way of life, and your career has spanned so many different ways of doing that. Thank you for sharing all those stories.
Yes, I didn't mean to go on for a long time, but
no.
It is a bit of a journey.
Well, on your blog you have this article, and it's about having participated in a writing workshop, and one of the activities was to write your life story in 6 words. And if you're okay with it, I'll read out those 6 words. Is that okay?
Yeah, I haven't heard it. I have to go back and revisit it now.
Yeah, so your life in 6 words as written by you: face forward, drink tea, trust, leap. And I thought this was amazing.
Yeah, I think that's kind of how it is. And here's my cup of tea for the afternoon.
Yeah, well, it sounds like your teaching career has been like that, where you've seen an opportunity and you've leapt into it. I love that you summarized your life in that way.
You never know what's going to come out, but that's kind of how it feels. So I thank you for rereading that, because I haven't revisited that in a little while, and I think I would still say that's true. It's, I tend to, even like I said last night, I'm thinking about, this new little learning journey that I'm on. How can I bring other people into this journey? And it's that same thing. Oh, just leap, just go.
Yeah.
It'll happen or not, but whatever.
Yeah. Well, this is a wonderful way to live life.
It is. It's, I think it's the, you never know what's coming next, and may as well enjoy the heck out of it while you're riding along.
So tell me about your environment when you step outside, when you explore Alaska. I know you've told me that you have seen many of the corners of your state, but I'd love to hear about nature near you. Alaska is a really unique and amazing part of the world with extremes, I would say, extremes of weather and climate and extremes of natural environments. I'd love to hear you describe your nature, the nature that you access every day. In your own way, in your own words, in your own experience.
That's an interesting question. Again, I'm looking out the window while I'm talking to you, because I'm just, again, every day I'm filled with gratitude for where I live, and have been able to live for the majority of my life. I moved to Alaska when I was a pretty young adult. I'm no longer a young adult. I think of how my day begins. Every single day begins with me taking our 2 dogs outside in the morning to go to the bathroom after the night, right? But stepping outside means walking from the house through the backyard, which is our garden, into the woods, which is a national forest.
Again, it's interesting that synergy with your childhood experience of having the house and then directly the forest, which is a nice echo.
Yeah, I've never thought of that. That's but it's so true. And we have just because the years of the dogs using the trail behind our house, it's very well worn down. So, and quite often there's bears or moose back there.
Oh wow!
But you usually know ahead of time, thankfully. So it's just this journey into this magical little forest back there. I just love it. I just feel like I'm going into my own special little spot in the universe. First thing in the morning, nobody else is up and around, and the dogs are out, sniffing around doing their thing. And then we're only in there 5 minutes, 10 minutes each morning, but it's just like this little magical spot that's all mine. And it's filled with ferns and spruce trees and alders and, whatever flowers might be popping up through the ferns. And then all the duff, from the trees is on the ground and lichen everywhere. I just love it in there, and then you come back and you've got the nice, neat little garden beds. And then you go back in the house. So that's like my immediate environment. And Seward itself is, we're on the Pacific. So we are, I don't know if it's 3,000 miles or what across the water from you.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's on a bay called Resurrection Bay. And so we're very much affected by the coastal weathers, you know, so we've got a lot of rain and a lot of overcast. It's also in an old glacial valley. So we've got ice fields on both sides of us, high mountains and ice fields, which of course are affecting, we get a lot of snow. But it's beautiful. I mean, we've just got these intensely high, sharp, jagged peaks down to the ocean in a very short distance. And then the forest. So it's like, yeah, it's kind of magical.
And I know gardening is important to you. I'd love to hear you describe your garden, the garden that you tend, the garden that you create yourself.
I won't take credit for doing that myself. That's a joint venture between my husband and I. He also loves gardening, and he's also a wood crafter by trade. So, you know, we have beautiful garden beds and a beautiful greenhouse. And both of us love spying out huge, big, beautiful rocks that we bring home to help build other beds, you know, the perennial beds and so on. So we have 5 raised beds outside. We have to have them raised just because the soil is so cold. You have to definitely get them up off the ground to warm up that soil. And yeah, we just grow the plants that just generally grow well in Alaska. It's kind of lazy vegetable gardening because it's like, well, carrots will grow here and kale will grow here and broccoli and, you know, all the cold crops and so on, potatoes. You know, so we just grow those standards, and we'll experiment a little bit in the greenhouse because we get a little bit more heat. But yeah, it's just a place of a lot of joy. We just, you know, we have garden art around in between the beds and, you know, a fire pit out there so we can have friends over and sit around the fire. And yeah, it's a happy place for sure.
I love that you said a place of a lot of joy. For me, my garden is just this little wonderland, and it's small. It's just a place that I go to fill up. Like you said, just to fill with joy for a moment, tend those plants and just to be there and feel that feeling.
Yeah, there is something magical about being around plants, whether they're ones you cultivate yourself or are wild. And just having that little spot where you can go outside. I mean, I think, you know, we know that through nature journaling is just the value of the outdoors. And, you know, so I think that being fortunate enough to be able to start my day every single day, no matter what the weather is, by going outdoors, makes life so much better. You know, and then, you know, like I said too, just with my workspace, my office space, I can see out into the garden and into the woods too. So anytime I can just look up and just get another dose of it.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. So tell me how nature journaling came into your life. How did that become part of your journey?
You know, when I think back, you know, of course I'll address Wild Wonder in a little bit here, but you know, when I think back before that, it was just observing some other people's, you know, I guess I would have thought of them as artists at the time, but I remember seeing somebody's trail sketches. They were, a friend of mine had a quilt show in Anchorage. But the other artist that was showing at that time had trail journals, and he was doing very small paintings of his explorations on trails. And I just remember seeing those and thinking, wow, I want to do that. And, you know, and I was definitely one of those teachers that would tell the kids, okay, I'm going to draw a picture for you on the board. There's no laughing. You may not laugh at my stick figures, right?
Yeah.
And of course, everybody burst out laughing. But yeah, so it was just that seeing people's work of travels. It was usually travels or trails. And then, you know, so the door was cracked open, and I'm sure there's some things I'm forgetting, but I was down in Northern California for my niece's high school graduation, and I was driving, listening to the public radio station, and they had an interview on with the artist Obi Kaufman. I think, Beth Ann, you were at the first nature journal? The conference in Asilomar?
No. So there was one in-person one. We're talking about the Wild Wonder Nature Journaling Conference. There was an in-person one, and then there was COVID. And so I didn't go to the one in the US, but I was at the first online, so it transformed into something online. So I wasn't there, although it sounded amazing.
Yeah, for some reason I thought you were, but that's just because you were back at the very beginning. And so anyway, that first one, I was down in California the year before the spring. I guess it was just the spring before, because high school graduation would have been May or June. And heard Obi Kaufman, who's an artist from the Bay Area who does amazing work. Just amazing. He's got this field atlas series that is all watercolor. It's so beautiful. And he was being interviewed, and towards the end of his interview, he mentioned the practice of nature journaling itself, and then mentioned John Muir Laws, just as a reference for listeners to, look up more if they were interested. And so I pulled over as soon as the interview was over. I pulled over there's a little independent bookstore in the town that my brother's living in, and ran in and found Obi's book in there.
That's amazing.
So I went in and bought the book immediately.
I love
then I got up there and we were doing all the graduation stuff, and then it's like at night I'm finally trying to go to sleep and I'm Googling John Muir Laws and trying to find out about this stuff. And so then I, ended up that happened to be the same year as the first Wild Wonder Conference. And so I registered for that, and it was truly an amazing experience. It was such a turning point for me, because it was something that, was always deep inside of me and makes a lot of sense, from, childhood up. But just that whole feeling like, which I think so many people on the face of the earth feel, I can't do art, and just learning that it's not about the art, and then learning about the value of the connection. And just that whole 4-day journey turned me around just completely. And so I've been I don't know if you want to say a convert, but definitely connected since then in every way and form. And of course then the teaching side of me is trying to bring people along on this journey with me, so I've invited a lot of friends on the journey. I started the website in Seward, and that more as a resource to encourage other people, so when we have events here in Seward or nearby, and I'll share that out, but it's it's just same thing. It's just that trying to open that door for more people. And so here we are. What is it, 5 years later already, maybe 6?
Yeah. I love this story. I love that you heard that on the radio, and then you jump out of the car and get the book and then are poring over it at night. And then
it's that leap thing. I do it no matter what. It's like, great interviews. Let me stop and get a book.
But also that teacher in you is like, okay, this is something amazing. I'm going to share it. And you created the Seward Nature Journaling website, and that has its own momentum. I'd love to talk a little bit more about making or bringing nature journaling into your community, because you've done nature journaling workshops, you've done nature journaling in the garden. You recently had a pop-up nature journaling in the garden session, which I thought was amazing. I'd love to talk about that, about the teacher in you and the workshops you've done, and just bringing the community with you along for this beautiful experience.
Yeah, it's been a challenge because it's not, I challenge, I think partially because so much of it happened during COVID. So we're going through that phase of people. I feel like this year is the first year that people are finally coming back together as we used to come together without hesitation. So the workshops haven't necessarily been as full as any of us would have hoped. But it's still, I guess one of my favorite memories was from last summer. And I don't know if for some reason I thought maybe you'd interviewed her already at some point. It was Kim McNett. She's from Homer.
Yes, I have. Yes, she's amazing.
So Kim, she is amazing. I love her. just yesterday we were comparing notes on an earthquake up here yesterday. Kim, what was your reaction? But anyway, she came over here for a week last summer, and we coordinated where she would teach the workshops and I did all the organizational end of it. And so she did, was it two? I think 2 adult workshops and then a 3-day stretch of youth workshops. And they were really well attended. And of course, Kim did an amazing job, as only Kim would do. But one of my favorite memories is, last summer we were having one of these just crazy rainy summers, right? Just, it's like, come on, blue sometime. It's, just show us a little blue in the sky at some point. And these kids showed up day after day to do these nature journaling workshops with Kim. And so that to me hits my heart, is, especially when it's kids. I mean, I love opening doors for adults too, but, the kids are what it's about, because they're going to be our future, obviously. Yes. And they didn't care about the rain. We had a little shelter we were able to sit under part of the time, but the rest of the time, Kim had brought waterproof stuff that they could work on. We've got pictures of them sitting under these dripping spruce trees, and it wasn't warm out. It was so. That's the kind of stuff I still hope for, is even if it's just a handful of whoever can show up, just those little bits of connection. And there's just small bites of learning. It doesn't have to be something major. It's just those little bits, and we seem to keep getting those little bits with the website. It's like sometimes I'll do it, sometimes I'll invite another instructor to do it. And in Alaska, again, being such a small population, our degrees of separation, they say it's 6 degrees across most of the planet. Up here, it's 1 to 2 degrees. So you kind of know each other in one way or another.
Yeah. Well, even though it's a small population, it seems like there's quite a number of active nature journaling groups. And even I think you've matched up and done some online sessions with different nature journal groups. I'd love to hear about that. The active nature journaling networks that you're all coming together in Alaska.
I think Kim has this one called the Boreal Nature Journaling Group. And so it's a Facebook group, but she also, brings people together, and she offers workshops and so on. And I think that's probably got the broadest connection in and out of state, and so that's one of the venues that, that's a bit of the glue, holding everybody together. Another instructor up here is Kristen Link.
Yes, I've interviewed her as well.
You've spoken with Kristen? Yeah. So Kristen's, she's another phenomenon. Before COVID, I had worked with Kristen, and we were trying to coordinate a time for her to come to Seward, and then we gave up after COVID hit. And she's become so engaged in what she's doing over the last few years that, I'm not even going to try to bother her to come down here. I'm just going to go up there in another summer or two and take a class with her. But so it's like we all know each other. We've been to conferences on and off together. And it's just being Alaska is, we're enmeshed in each other's lives, not in a bad way, but you're just always touching your borders. And so, I think we kind of all know what each other's doing, and, don't hesitate to reach out to each other if we want to, ask something or try to connect something. And,
When I spoke with Kim, I sort of experienced Alaska through her words in a way that I hadn't before. And one thing that became really obvious through that conversation was that Alaskans are governed entirely by the seasons and the weather, and that nature is so much a part of your lives just because it's so forceful and it's so extreme in a way. She was saying that she really lives by the seasons, and she's very active during the spring and summer, and then there's a period almost of hibernation where you're inside, and that connection with nature, maybe that's why there's such an active nature journaling or part of the reason why there's such an active nature journaling community in Alaska, because you are you're so connected with nature, because nature is so present in every way, in the weather and the seasons, that maybe there's a deeper connection with nature for that reason. I'm not sure, but after talking to Kim, I thought, wow, your life is entirely structured around nature. Here in Brisbane, we don't even plan really we don't have a backup plan for outdoor things, because it's mostly always sunny, or you can do things all year round. But because you're so governed by nature and the rhythms and the seasons, maybe that's why everyone's more connected with nature.
It very well could be. It's a perspective I'll think about after we're done talking, because I think you could be quite right. And and obviously you picked it up from Kim's conversation, and I'm guessing from Kristen as well, because Kristen's the most off grid of all of us. And it's there's definitely a thing where and I think they would agree with me. I mean, I pick it up in what they say and write anyway, and most of us have been up here any length of time. It's the way it is. But there's just this complete frenetic energy in Alaska in the summer. We've got nearly 24 hours of daylight, depending where we are in the state. It's when we get what warmth we're going to get, and you can be outside without worrying about dying most of the time. You don't have to wear 700 layers to go outside and survive.
Yeah.
And so we all live that way. We're just kind of like this, bzzz, and you can feel it. And then the tourists go home, which is coming up here soon, and school year has started again, and we start preparing for winter. I mean, everybody's doing that right now. If you walked outside, you'd hear chainsaws going and people finishing construction projects. And, it's just the way it is. Today we cleaned our chimney stack because we'll be using the wood stove nonstop here pretty soon. But there's also this kind of, oh my gosh, thank God it's winter.
That's what Kim said, actually. It's kind of a relief to, after that crazy energy of summer and all the activities, to just like, okay, now it's our rest time.
Right. And then it's like, then out come the photos and the nature journaling. It's kind of the pictures of things. Yeah. Although some people are braver than I, my fingers freeze up so fast I can't journal outside when it's that cold. Yeah. I know both Kim and Kristen do. Yeah. But it's just, we have to live seasonally in intense seasons, and intense daylight or lack thereof. And, no matter where you are in the state, it's, you have to be cognizant of when you step foot out the door every day of what the weather's doing. Yeah. But there's that, I've got to admit, I'm glad summer's slowly, I haven't put the garden to sleep yet or, any of that. I'm not quite ready to give up on summer yet, but it's coming. The leaves are starting to turn. And, but it's the same thing as I look longingly over at my side of the office space here. That's my nature journaling side, or where the sewing machine is. It's like, I'm coming.
That's amazing. That rhythm, that feeling, there's the intensity, there's the activity, and then there's the rest. And nature does that as well alongside you. And that's a beautiful thing, I think, to be that in tune with it, to be that connected with, okay, now everyone get ready for winter. We're going in. We're going in.
Yeah. Right. And that's it. And it's, I think that's, those of us who stay up here, you do become very cyclical, it's just life. It's it has to be.
So there's a sort of migration of tourists. Is there also a migration of people who come for the summer and then leave? Because
Alaska is such a tourist destination in the summer. Yes. Like our little town is 6,000 people. And that's pushing it out to the very edges of what's considered Seward. And when you consider one of those large cruise ships brings in 5,000+ people,
Wow.
our town doubles with a cruise ship.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's one cruise ship, not two.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just a whole different thing when, we kind of have this sense and not wanting to sound negative, but we have this kind of feeling like, oh, we just got our town back.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. The energy goes back to being a small community again, and we all kind of come out and see each other, and and that's the other nice thing about winter is, I think people tend to gather more. They'll get together for whatever, the book clubs start back up again, and the sewing groups start up again, and the art group, so it's and we're all ready for that pace by the time it hits.
Yes. Yes. That's amazing.
And it's always nice to reconnect, because all of us are buzzing around doing crazy things all summer, and then you get to reconnect with everybody in the winter.
I'm fascinated by this idea of the extreme long days or the extreme short days. And one of the Nature Journal pages I saw of yours was this beautiful way of documenting the dawn chorus. And the fact that you had put first light as 4:45 a.m. To me, this is amazing.
That dawn chorus, I have to give that credit to Melinda Nakagawa. She's an instructor. Yeah, and you probably know Melinda.
Yeah, she's been on this podcast. She's a good friend.
Of course. Yeah, she's beautiful. And so that dawn chorus is her. That's where I first learned about it from. And last summer was the first time I finally got to do it and sat down and did it on the solstice. Yeah, and it this year I wasn't here for the solstice, so I just, I really wanted to do it on the solstice. But there's something about that connection of paying attention, that much close attention. I think I started that one maybe 2 hours before the actual first light. I just wanted to hear what birds were out there. Yeah. And then, followed it along until an hour or so after the sun was up. But it's just... I know ever since doing that journaling exercise, I just listen so much more to the birds in the morning. When you live somewhere and you like, oh, okay, there's a robin, there's a junco, there's a, whatever. But it's like, I think I'm listening to their conversations more than I used to.
Yeah.
It's an interesting thing. I know there was a time, this area behind our house it's a fairly good sized wooded area, and over the last couple of years there's been female moose who deliver their calves back there. So for that calving season for the moose, you kind of have to not go back there and disturb them. And I remember this summer the magpies were up in the trees just going wacky one morning.
Okay.
And I thought, okay, why are they being so crazy today? And sure enough, I got to the very edge of the trail, and there was Mom Moose, and she stood up and looked at me and was like, okay, we'll go another direction. You stay back there with your babies. You can have the woods for the time you need it. Yeah. But it was the magpies, and I don't know if they were, yakking because, oh, look, the moose is busy back there. But, it's what alerted me to pay more attention.
Yes.
And so, yeah, there's just something about that much intent. I mean, that's what nature journaling is, just so, it's just a beautiful exercise to just that deep dive. And, I think most of us will address that getting lost in what you're doing and not being aware of time. And, and it just keeps opening new connections all the time, and new, it's such an amazing practice.
It really is. And I'd love to hear your experience, because at the moment for my practice, I'm really diving into nature journaling specifically for my vegetable garden. And I know you've done some of this, and I would love to hear about your garden journal and how that was a bit of a feedback for, paying close attention to the garden, and how that translated into, for me, I find it a feedback loop. So the more I garden journal, the more I want to tend to the garden. It makes me a better gardener because I'm more observant. But I would love to hear your experience of nature journaling specifically in the garden.
I don't remember when. I want to say I've had this journal, the garden journal, going just for maybe this was the 4th season. And, I think what really got me going on that is a friend up in Fairbanks had sent me, I don't know if he saw it at an art show or what, but somebody had done an annual phenology wheel. So just a 12 spike, one for each month. And it was concentrating on gardens. And so this friend is a gardener, and he'd said, hey, take a look at this. I think you're really going to like this. And I think that's what started me on the journal. So, of course, it's got phenology wheels tracking each month, weather and so on. But it just that tracking, what I've put in, where I put it, how it did, what the weather conditions were, how many slugs we had that summer, because with this wet climate, we get a lot of slugs going after our produce. Paying attention, I'll include things about what birds are doing and what plants. Again, it's just another tool for a deeper connection. And, for any of us who have loved to garden for however long, there's just something, you just start noticing things. I mean, even if I don't track them in a journal, I'll find myself paying closer attention to anything and everything I'm doing out there.
Yes.
And just pausing for longer times. The dogs will come out, it's like, hey, are we going back inside to eat breakfast? And I'm like, no, I'm busy with the carrots right now.
At the moment I'm reading a book and it's called To Stand and Stare. And then the subline is How to Garden While Doing Next to Nothing. And it is very much like that. For me as well, I go out and I'm just with, like you say, with the carrots, just hanging with the beans and having a look.
Yeah. It's like, oh, look at those peas. Aren't they beautiful? Let me give you a squeeze and see if we're ready to eat. It's just, I don't think there's anything in the garden journal that I'm doing that much differently than in a nature journal or a travel journal. But it's just that paying attention that then you find yourself paying more attention unintentionally. It's just, your connections just seem to keep getting deeper no matter what part of the outdoors you're in.
It's a mindset shift, isn't it? It's like for me, it's like a mindset that grows, like you say. It gets more the more you do it. So you're sort of building your attention muscle almost.
Yeah. It's just funny, as you said muscle, I was thinking the same thing. And I think Jack Laws has called it, just building that muscle memory thing too. It's just, And when something becomes unintentional that you've always wanted to do intentionally, I think that, it's like, ding, got it. I love this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also find, like when you do something in your journal, say, for example, the listening to the dawn chorus, it's like, now you've got it. Now you're tuned into listening to bird sounds, noticing what they're doing, and even you can hear them. They can lead you places. I've found different things because of bird alarm calls, like you heard with the magpies. But now you're tuned. Once you've done that page, it's like, oh yeah, now I've done it. Now it's inside me. It's quite an amazing thing.
It is. It's and I think back to just those little bits. If you can do that with children, I think that's, we know the value of it, and so how can we help them, become such an intrinsic part of their lives as well.
Absolutely. This year you participated in the Global Geo Art Blitz. And I would love to hear you describe what this is for the listener if they don't know, and how it was for you. What was that experience like?
Yeah. Oh, Roseanne. I assume you've interviewed Roseanne as well.
Roseanne Hanson. Yes, I have.
Yeah. So It started with one of her, emails that comes out with her, the program she's offering and so on. And I was really bummed because I thought, oh, this sounds like fun. It just sounds like, it's not extra work. It's just whatever you happen to be doing during that week, share it. And I thought, oh, that'll be great. But then I remembered I wasn't going to be around, that I would be at this field study course out in rural Alaska that particular week. And so I emailed Roseanne and said, hey, here's my quandary. I said, if I'm journaling out there, can I use those materials? And of course she said yes. And I happened to do one 2-page journal thing just because that's what I wanted to do, was just to capture, those, they get called all sorts of different things, but I think the first time I ever heard it was a 12-inch by 12-inch plot, and how close of attention can you find? What can you find in that 12-inch by 12-inch plot? Yeah. So I worked in a journal, and this wasn't even a class assignment. This was just something I had wanted to do while I was out there. And I found this clump of freckled felt. It was a freckled lichen patch, but in it there were just all these other amazing tundra plants. I was out on the tundra. And so I had journaled that and included that. But then as part of the assignments for the field study, I had done 2 other just plant illustrations that were, part of the work we were doing. And so I just included those. So the Geo Art Blitz, my understanding, is global. And it came through iNaturalist. And it was just a snapshot of place and time around the globe. Yes. And they were, promoting and hoping from Roseanne's end that a lot of it would be journaling or sketching or music, any kind of art. It sounded so fun. So I'm excited to see the production. I guess she's doing some sort of a video, pulling it all together for the, it's either October or November that they'll be doing that in England and Great Britain. But yeah, it just sounded fun, something. And it's just that whole global community because, as you well know, and you're doing so beautifully, it's not just us here in one spot. It's global, and it's it's a conversation, but it's just such a way of being that and we're all so connected. Part of that, I guess, I don't want to thank COVID for too much, but I'd say some of this is just because we're so connected through the internet now, and had to be. And that was one of the things that just kept going beautifally, was this whole nature journaling community.
Grew. Yeah, it seemed to grow really
fast. And grew. And as people were looking for healthy alternatives, to stay sane during COVID, I think this was one of them for sure. Yeah, so it just was another just that whole global community connection that drew me in when I heard about it. And, because of the flexibility of it, it happened to work for where I was that week.
One of the most joyful parts of this whole nature journaling experience for me is connecting with people in different places. And I feel like, this podcast is one really wonderful way for us to learn about each other's nature. And I always go into, like I did with you, with my guests, like, what does nature look like for you? And then that gives you a chance to talk about your nature and for others to hear about it. And there's something special about that learning. We live in different parts of the world, but we have the same deep love of nature and paying attention and the same experience through nature journaling. I think that is a lovely way for people to connect.
Yeah, and I was just thinking, I always think of that, journaling exercises where, whether it's, at a conference or it's just encouraged that, for someone like me who's, had the good fortune to live in wild places, but, I think of people who live in cities and, much more urban areas, but that they too have a wild area, whether it's their own yard or a walk they take and the life that's around them, and it always fascinates me to hear that, hear interviews and read articles from people who are nature journaling, or just their connections to nature when they're in a city.
Yes.
You know, in a much more urban area, because to me, it's an amazing thing, and their experiences are beautiful. You know, just
yes.
Yeah. So I think it's just been such an eye-opening experience too, you know. Yeah.
And thinking about the next steps for you, I know that you've got a big your next big education or next big self-education adventure. You're going to be studying ethnobotany. Tell me about this new phase.
Yeah, which is what was making me think last night, how can I already start sharing this, and I'm only into the third course of this program? I'm sorry. I just want to tell people, I'm sorry, I can't help myself. Yeah, so I'll try to make it a short story, but I think I mentioned where I grew up in my youth, the neighbor across that was next door to us, and her amazing gardens, right? Mm. So she was, my parents' age, my mother's age, and, her kids were my age. So there's, 20 plus years age difference between us. And she came to visit me up here in Alaska about 25 years ago. And I was so thrilled that she wanted to come up here. But when she came up, I asked her, so what do you want to see and do? And her whole focus was plants. I mean, just plants. That's it. And she had earned her master's degree in ethnobotany at the age of 60.
Wow.
And so that was when I first heard about ethnobotany.
Do you want to describe what it is for the listener?
Well, I guess I love the name because it kind of says what it is. So the ethno part is people and botany plants. And so it's the study of the relationship between people and plants. I mean, that's the super simplified description of the program. So how people interact with plants, and plants are a part of people's lives, and back and forth. And it's a relationship thing. Yes. It's not just, a study. It's a relationship endeavor. And so when Lila came to visit, I think she was up here a week and a half, 2 weeks, and I contacted independent gardeners around this part of Alaska and invited us to their homes. So these were gardens that I had always wanted to get into myself. And I used her as an excuse. I kind of shared the Lila story, and so we got these invitations to people's home gardens that were phenomenal. They were just and people who were just so immersed in what they were doing. And then the other part of the trip was we went camping. And did a road trip and camped up north of here in a more tundra area because she really wanted to experience the tundra, and just spent our days hiking and exploring plants. Life doesn't get much better, right?
That's the best,
yeah. And so it was a glorious trip, but that was my introduction to ethnobotany. So fast forward 25 years, because you know what I've been doing for the last 25 years. I finally have a little more time in my life. And also, the University of Alaska in Fairbanks offers one of the few ethnobotany programs in the country for sure. And I don't know how many there are worldwide, but it's not a huge field of study that, is plopped into universities. So I've been dabbling, touching the go button on the university's page for years, years and years and years. And it just was not, it's like, no, you're not going to do this unless you have the time to put into it at the depth this is going to take you. So this was the right year. And I got accepted in the spring and took the first 2 courses this summer. And now I'm in the 3rd course, just started a few days ago. And it's like, oh, Beth Ann, it's like I found this whole new depth of connection to plants, and observing them and paying attention to them and understanding how, not only I interact with them, but just, in Alaska with our Alaska Native cultures. We bring their wisdom into this program up here too, and so you're talking like 10,000 years worth of plant knowledge coming in. Yeah.
This is fascinating.
My poor husband, he's like, oh, are you going to study again? I'm like, yeah, I'll talk to you later.
This is amazing. And I'm so interested in this area that, what is it? And I asked my community this question recently because I was out in the garden and I was doing that thing like we talked about before, just spending time there, just feeling good. And in fact, it was a day when I was sick. I had a cold and I got myself out of my bed and I just spent some time in the garden. And I
felt much better.
And felt better. And I was asking my community, what is it that we love about plants? What is it that connects us? What is it that we'll get up out of our sick bed to spend time with plants? And people, it was interesting, the range of answers. People said, because it's beautiful, because we're evolutionarily designed to be with plants, that, that there's actual chemicals that plants give off that make us physically, there's physical reasons and physical interactions between humans and plants that benefit us. But also there's something underlying humans and plants. And I'm really fascinated by this connection, that there's something really deep in us. And even we talked about COVID, and I feel like during COVID there was an incredible boom in the houseplant, the adoption of houseplants, and people just were feeling like, I need something, and often that was plants.
That was it.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by that connection between humans and plants. So I really want to stay connected with you and learn more about what you find out about humans and plants.
Yeah, it's just been, it's like one of those place and time things. It's the right time for me to be doing this and understanding so much more, not just about myself, but about the cultures that I live and interact with all the time, and the people, who, we tend to be closer to, or, usually involved in similar things that we all care about. But I know one thing that just, it's the very first class, the introductory class, when I took it, we had to choose a plant that we wanted to do a presentation on and study a bit more. And the plant I chose was Labrador tea, which I don't know if you have that at higher elevations in Australia or not. There are subspecies of it in the southern hemisphere, but you'd have to be up at a higher elevation. And I can't remember if I saw it while I was there, but it's a plant that when I was in college, 2 of the summers that I was in college, I worked in Canada guiding canoe trips with younger kids. And that was my first exposure to Labrador tea. And it's got this very strong, pungent scent. I compare it to rosemary, but it doesn't have the same smell, but that same kind of feel to it, kind of piney. And I just fell in love with the plant. And, medicinally it was used as a tea and other things. And ever since then, no matter where I am in the northern latitudes, if I smell Labrador tea anywhere, I have to go where it is, know. And it's the only time in my entire life that I've taken a nap. My mother used to say I would drive her nuts because I didn't nap ever as an infant. and so when I napped, I had to tell her about this. But I was lying in the tundra up north, and in the northern part of our state. I was up there for part of the summer, and we had been out in summer frenetic, and I fell asleep on the tundra. And when I woke up, I realized I was lying in a bed of Labrador tea.
That's amazing.
So it's like all these connections. But during this course this summer, as we started diving deeper into these plants, and I found out more and more medicinal uses and so on, traditional uses. I also found that there's a social emotional learning connection that Labrador is it's considered a plant of belonging. So, if you've got this connection to and it makes sense to me, it's like I have always been connected to the northern latitudes, and that's always where I felt I belonged, even when I grew up in Northern California. And there it is. It's this plant that I just, I gather whenever I'm out, and I'm where Labrador tea is. And just a month or so ago, my husband and I were camping, and we were out on this coastal trail, but we had gone up a hill enough, and all of a sudden I just got this whiff of Labrador tea, and I was not expecting it anywhere around where we were hiking. But it was just a dry enough hillside that however it got there it was. And so, of course, we had to pause while I enjoyed the Labrador tea. But, so that, it's that kind of deepening that connection with plants even further that this ethnobotany program is doing. And then, of course, all the new information that's being learned all the time. And meeting there's just so many fabulous people in this program. And because of the internet, it's not just here in Alaska. There's people from around the country that are in it. So
this is
stay
fabulous.
Tuned.
What a big adventure. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. I've really enjoyed getting to know you and hearing about your teaching in all those different environments, all those different settings, and your connection with your landscape and this amazing adventure you're embarking on now, deepening your understanding of the human connection to plants. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for the invitation. It's been a pleasure, and I do hope that the next time I get over to Australia, I can run into you somewhere.
We will go on an adventure together for sure.
Definitely.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Kirstie. I adored hearing about all the different places she's worked and the variety of settings and the people she encountered through her teaching. I also loved that a thread that was running through the whole conversation was the joy that can be found when we surround ourselves and pay attention to plants. If you'd like to know more about Seward nature journaling, and if you're Alaskan, you might like to get in touch to connect with people in your area, you can find the link to Kirstie's website in the show notes for this episode. Thank you so much for listening. See you next week.